This is going to be an interesting interview. I have David Gasser at the microphone here today for a while. David is a journalist, a reporter with long experience in radio, broadcasting, television as well?
Yes, a bit of TV, Hiron. 25 years, actually. I started when I was 16 years old.
Oh, wow. So we're about the same age when we started.
Yeah.
16, 17. That's great. David is from where in Switzerland?
Well, I live in Lausanne. For 10 years, I'm a Swiss citizen trying to be. I'm not exactly a citizen right now, but I probably want that. But I'm French. I'm obviously, I was born and raised in France, and I left the country 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm. What was there about radio that excited you and you had to get into it?
I don't know, but probably my father was listening to radio station all the time. BBC, mostly, Radio 1 on the long wave. John Peel, all those best DJs from the 60s, from the pirate radios to the official BBC. And also, I guess, the local radio stations in Le Mans, where I was born, because it was 1981. There was a lot of fuzz on the FM dial. A lot of new stations were popping up. And
this was the beginning of the private radio phenomena in France.
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
it had begun in Italy in 74.
Yeah.
And finally was 81 when
That's true.
President Mitterrand was elected. And
well, he said the program of Mitterrand was to say, look, I'm going to free the airwaves as a proof that I'm very left-wing. I am not sure he was completely, but he was intelligent. Mm-hmm. And he knew that by saying that to the people like us, I mean, radio junkies, of course, the airwaves is one argument to be elected because it's freedom, after all.
Liberty of expression, freedom of expression. Mm-hmm. Not just the state having the final say on everything, first, last, and always. But
that's very French. That's true. It came after though, because you know, obviously you know the story. But the first years it was like anarchy. People could really create their own radio station, talk about whatever they wanted, and after a while. There's always a local authority thinking that those guys are too free. We need to really
exactly too free. You have to rein them in. You have to make some rules, and that's what eventually happened. So they called them Radio Libre, free radios at first. But I tell you, we're not free today. We have a deontology, as they say. We have,
and you also need money, so you can't say whatever you want because money is also to convince people. You have to be very polite.
Well, David, you got into radio. What was your first job?
My first job as a DJ, actually. I was playing a Club Hollywood, which was a show by Philippe Manœuvre, a famous radio and TV and rock critic in France. And it was a cassette tape played on the radio. And my job was very simple. It was to turn the tape and play some commercials in between and to say one word like RTE, it's 4 o'clock, and the second part of the show by Philippe Manœuvre Club Hollywood. Hollywood was the brand of the gum.
No, this was a private station?
Yeah, it was a private station.
In Paris?
In Le Mans.
Le Mans, okay, yes.
And then I worked in a very professional radio station in Le Mans called West FM. And that was a great radio station because this is where you learn about the real rules, how to talk, how to be very gentle and not to scream and to actually speak normally and to have that smile in your voice. And also to use the music as a way to get understood. We had a playlist. It was very professional. We had also jingles that were made in the US. We had all those clocks, you top of the hour, you have that sort of jingle, and then you have the commercial break at that time. So I really learned the basics of American commercial radio. And then I wanted to do journalism, so I went to Europe 1.
Europe 1?
Yes.
And how was that?
That was great because that's for me that was the best station in France. My father and my mother were listening to France Inter all the time, and I was more into Europe when I was oppositional. I was really into something more wild in a way, and also I liked the commercial radio rhythm. It was faster. Yeah. There were jingles. There were people speaking with great voices, with humor. There were Coluche and even Jean Lucas. I don't know. People who made me laugh. And also my grandparents loved Europe 1. So I guess it was more skipping the two generations. I was more into the lifestyle of my grandparents, which was to talk freely on the radio, to have fun, and to play the music I liked.
So what did you do at Europe 1?
I was a sports journalist. I was a reporter.
A reporter.
In the morning show. So from 7 to 9, I was not that present, but from 5 to 7, I was talking about the results and stories about Lance Armstrong, about Formula One drivers, Jean Alesi, who lives who lives in Lyon, or used to live in Lyon, tennisman. I try to find the right story for people who were tuning in, and they were expecting something very high-end, high quality on air, and so I try to find the best stories. Only 3 or 4 minutes, twice.
Okay, and that was about what year?
1 year. 2001. This is sadly when 9/11 happened. So I remember being was just hired for the back to school grid, and then 9/11 came, and I was at the radio station to have a medical checking, and I could hear all those noises in the corridors, and I couldn't really figure out what it was, and people were shocked. And something happens, and I don't know why. And then, we had all those in European studios and newsrooms. We had all those screens on one channel, LCI, the TV of the news TV of TF1, and it was actually the first plane getting into one tower, and I said, wow, I'm not going to talk about sports the following days. And we were non-stop on air talking about what happened in New York.
That's quite a thing. Now, how did you happen to go to the States then? It was soon after this?
Oh, then you have no. It happens. Well, I have part of my family is American. My uncle lives in Santa Barbara. He's American. My cousins live in San Francisco or New York. My wife is American. So I'm very linked to your country, or your former country. And I love that culture, I love the place, and I love everything that goes on there. So I said, I have to go there one day. I wanted to travel before, so I did a few years in Paris as a reporter and producer at France Inter. Then I wanted something else, so I tried to find a job in Australia. With radio stations, Triple J, ABC, SBS, all those great radio broadcasters. My English was not that great, not as good as today, so they couldn't really hire me, and I didn't know anything about Australia. So I said, well, I have two options, Paris again, France, and we'll see. And then somebody that I knew left France Inter for Couleur 3, and he said, look, I work there in Switzerland, you should give it a try one day. And I said yes, so I ended up in Lausanne to learn music programming. That was a brand new job for me. I loved it. But I'm still a journalist. And I had an opportunity to work for RTL. And if you are French, you know that RTL is the biggest station in France, and probably one of the biggest stations in the world, because it's historic. So I said, well, okay, Lausanne will have to wait because I have something to do with them. So I went back to Paris, worked with RTL, and then ended up in New York.
New York, working for RTL in New York.
Yeah, as a reporter again.
Okay.
Yeah, like a correspondent. So I had I was lucky because I had to follow President Obama in Cleveland during the rallies he made. That he wasn't a president at that time. He was a senator and wanted to be a president. So of course, as a black man, you don't know if it's going to happen. And then you see suddenly that something strange happens in the society where everybody's excited about the guy, his program, and what he shows, what he displays. And I got very interested, not only about the character of Obama, but everything that went around the campaign and also the energy in the country. That was wonderful. New York at night, during the election night, was just a crowded place with people in tears and crying with joy. Even some Republicans told me, well, why not? We're going to give it a try and we'll see. We're not really confident in what he says, but who knows? And he was re-elected. But I was far gone in a few months after because I really wanted to try Switzerland and its radio business.
So now you've been back in Switzerland for, 10 years now?
10 years, yeah.
Okay. And what are you doing now?
Now I'm a web editor and community manager for NotreHistoire.ch, which is our history.ch.
Our history.
Notrehistoire.ch, our history.
Okay.
There's no equivalent in English right now, but we're thinking of a national website that would gather every archive of RTS, because we work with the archive of the RTS, with the people of Romandie, but also people who live in the Swiss German parts of the country. We already have the Tessinois, people from the Italian Switzerland, and also from Grischun, from the Romansh country. So that's we're already covering, let's say, one good third of the country with three websites.
How does this work? These are websites, and what do you provide on there?
Actually, people provide, because it's completely collaborative. So people like you and me, if you are related to Switzerland, you publish your own documents. And those documents are actually family pictures of you in the Matterhorn, of you in Bern one day, or you in Zurich, or in Romandie, because it's mostly people who live in Romandie. So they are going to show where they are, mostly. And then you talk about your passions, but also subjects that are related to the history of people, which means, let's say, everything that is related to the school system, les sociétés de jeunesse, the groups of people, the communities, the events, the fêtes traditionnelles, the traditional festivals. So that makes a lot of material that people can publish.
Now, this is printed, or this is audio?
No, it's only digital. It's only a website.
Okay.
But since it's digital, then you have audio, video, and text.
Oh, you got all three?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And also, you have the archive of the national television. So the RTS shows are in there. Not all the shows, but a huge selection. And also radio documents from way back, in the 60s, the 50s.
How do you make a living from that?
It's all public funded, so it's BILAG now coming to Seraf. And it's also income from foundations, because we are Fonsard, a foundation created by the RTS, but financed by different stakeholders. So the RTS, of course, the SSR, but also people like local foundations of Geneva who have an interest in giving money because they want their archive to be displayed to the whole world.
That's fascinating. And why is Radio 74 of interest to you? You came all the way over here today to interview us.
I like your voice. I like the way you speak to the people. It's really, I like the human touch. And you're very soft, and we would say in French, posé. It's quite comforting when you have all those people screaming on air all the time about the news, the breaking news and everything. You're actually the opposite. You're more like a voice of wisdom. So that's one thing. Also, it's very practical to hear Radio 74 to have news in English. I used to work for WRS. It was almost the same. But here now, I only have the FM on my car, so you're the only one in my car speaking in that
don't
language.
have a DAB radio yet.
Yeah, well, not yet. No, the car is too old. It's actually my wife's car, and we love to listen to Radio 74. Sometimes we're surprised because we have the news and then music that we never heard before. Because it's not our culture. My wife used to like hardcore punk music of New York and Washington, and I was into rock and roll. So that's not what you expect to listen when you tune in a radio station. But we stay, so that means that your music programming policy is good.
We used to have disc jockeys, like discotheque jockeys. And I remember one guy called up one day and he says, after I've done my shift, I go home in the middle of the night and I switch on Radio 74 just to unwind, just to calm down. It's so soothing. Thank you. Don't change your format.
Well, you're healing. Those who have ear problems, it's really helpful to really get a well-balanced edition after that.
Kind of a bomb. Tell me about your wife. Where's she from?
She's from New York. She's from Long Island. She was born and raised born in the Bronx as an Italian American from a family that came from Sicily.
Does she speak Italian?
She understands and speaks a bit of Italian because she went there many times now. Since we're in Switzerland, it's easier. But she has to learn because she wants to retire there one day. So
what's
I said
what's
yes.
her name? Can I ask?
Her name is Amy. Amy.
Amy, hello, from Ron here, and your husband, David. Like to meet you.
She's gonna love it.
Do you have children?
Yes, one, Justin. Justin is 19 years old.
Hello, Justin. And I'd like to meet you too sometime. Thank you.
Well, you'll have them once in the studio if we're invited, of course.
Sure, you're always invited here.
You're like family too, you know, being an expat. I mean, I'm French, so I'm not really an expat, but still I live in Switzerland, so that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
But Amy, being so far away from New York, even if it's like 7 hours or 8 hours to travel now, you know, you need a media, and that's what 74 is. Lifestyle 74 now is for, I guess. It's to make the link between your culture that stayed back home, even if it's the American culture is very familiar to the French one and the Swiss one. There's still this huge gap. And for her, it's really important to have that access to a part of your culture and identity, I guess.
You know, it's funny because when I'm in France, people think of me as an American.
Yes.
When I'm in America, they call me the Frenchman. You know, I don't know where I belong anymore, and it's kind of typical of people that live around this part of the world. Where you know, when you become an international, and you speak more than one language, you've lived in some other place, you're living in a place other than where you were born. That's an international, and to get to where you feel pretty comfortable almost anywhere, but never totally comfortable anywhere.
I get you, because one anecdote, I went back to Europe One in 2014 for a replacement. I was doing Europe Soir and Europe Night, which are the news editions at night in the evening. And somebody came to me after one shift at night and said, well, I really like what you do. It's very different. You're so slow and so articulate, but don't take it bad. I like it so much. And to me, it wasn't even a thought that I was not speaking exactly like a French presenter, like I used to. Yeah. But that's certainly because I spent 6 or 7 years at that time in Switzerland and completely changed my way of thinking and way of speaking. That when I became a broadcaster again, I was no longer a French typical. So you see how it can change.
You adapt to where you are, and that becomes part of a total. The pie is diluted. It changes. It's gives it more flavor, more color. You know.
Absolutely.
It's an amazing thing. David, it's been a real pleasure talking to you a little bit. I wish you all the best in your project. How can we see your website?
Notrehistoire.ch, it's completely free, so you can actually, if you are interested in history and your history and the history of the other Swiss, go to Notre Histoire, not like our histoire, like history.
So Notre, N-O-T-R-E, and Histoire, like history, but with an E on the end.
Yeah.
Histoire.ch.
Absolutely. It's a wonderful website. We're a small team, very nice team, led by a woman that has so much energy to drive us, called Françoise Clément. And it's very inspirational because you don't know anything about Switzerland, then you get to know a lot of nice stories. It's like Radio 74 in a way. You listen and you learn something new and something inspiring every day. So, of course, we're not so much into audio, but more into reading news articles. Not newspapers articles, but more historical magazines type of articles, and also videos. And photos. Photos is the main asset of our website. We have 100,000 documents. Wow. Probably more than 2/3 are photos.
David, thank you so much for sharing your story and who you are, what you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope we stay in touch. I mean, I'm going to run also an article about you, so I wish that people could find access to that article. It's my own website. So, suississimo.com. Probably.
What is it again?
Suississimo. That's very difficult. I try to make a play on word with that name.
Suississimo,
it's like Swiss the word Switzerland in French, and Sissimo,
Is it like
Italian.
It's Swiss.
Sissimo, exactly. You spell it right.
Issimo.
Yeah.
Swiss-issimo with
Yeah,
double S's twice.
SUISSISSIMO.ch. .com, sorry,
.com.
.com.
Okay.
And we're going to hear your voice, so probably people will be surprised because you don't have the same voice, I guess, when you're out on a different
I
medium.
mean, on this microphone, I sound different.
Yeah,
although
that's what
today
I'm
my
thinking.
voice is cracked up a little bit, but
But I'm sure people will recognize you.
probably will.
And I hope to actually make it known. I mean, in my community, people must have heard of Radio 74, but I guess people need to know what it's about.
Yeah. And the new Lifestyle 74.
We have to get used to that
Our
name.
new name. It's
That's a
hard for me to
wonderful
learn, too. Again, thank you, David. God bless. We'll talk to you again sometime, I hope soon. Eh?
Yeah. God bless you. God bless you.